Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Vegas Legal Magazine podcast. I'm Mark Fierro with Vegas Legal Magazine publisher Tyler Morgan, Fierro Communications Vice President Jeff Haney. Thank you so much for joining us today. Nevada has not had a Democratic governor since 1999, when Governor Bob Miller served with distinction. Our guest today, Steve Sisolak, hopes to change that. Sisolak is the chairman of the Clark County Commission, where he sits with the other Democratic candidate for governor, Chris Giuliani, also known as Chris G. Sisolak was elected to the Nevada Board of Regents in 1998, served as University Regent for 10 years, entered the race as a presumptive favorite, very well funded, and with the anti-Trump feelings in Nevada running fairly high. We're now just weeks away from early voting for primary. Ads for the governor's race now dominate the airways. Thank you so much for joining us today, Chris.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity.
The big question, why? Why run?
Well, I served 10 years, as you said, previously on the Board of Regents, and then now 10 years on the County Commission. I think I've learned a lot. I think I was able to contribute to some very positive things, and we accomplished some things. And what I've learned, I think we can take to the state level and work on some issues that I think are long overdue in terms of being addressed.
How tight is the race right now?
Well, we're up. I'm confident that if we can get our message out and have the resources to do that and get our message out to voters and turn out the people we've identified, we'll be fine. It's just a matter of turnout and getting your message out.
I think my gut was the read, and having lived here for a long time, a year ago it looked as if you were going to wipe the floor with anybody that got in the race, and it seems a little bit closer than that. Not that you're behind or not that I'm doubting your numbers, but it seems as if it's tightened up a bit.
It's tightened up. I think there's a movement nationally, the Me Too movement, that that's affecting women. A lot more women, if you look at the primaries that have come along in special elections in the last month or two. A lot of women are successful because of the Me Too movement, and women are turning out at a greater percentage. But I'm confident, even with that demographic, that if we get our message out and we explain to people what we stand for, we'll be fine.
I'm going to ask one more question before I turn it over to Jeff, and that is, yesterday across the country, in primaries across the country, in Democratic primaries, it was the far left. The more liberal that you got, the better your chances. You've come in as a moderate, and clearly Chris G is to your left. Do you think that's going to be have an effect in this race?
Well, Chris is to my left, but I'm comfortable with where we're at. I stand for the things that I believe that she stands in, that progressives are interested in. I think just being far left to be far left doesn't do an awful lot. I think the root word of progressive is progress. In order to make progress, you have to get to 4 votes on the county commission. You need to perform and to actually lead. Voting no in protest to something doesn't accomplish an awful lot. Nothing comes from that. We don't create any jobs. We don't improve education. You just vote no and hit the red button, and I don't think that's what people are looking for.
Mark mentioned Governor Miller up top, and if you go back all the way to Governor Bryant, actually, with just one exception in Nevada, the Democratic governors have been kind of moderate Democrats, I think it's fair to say, and the Republican governors have been, I think, fairly moderate Republicans. Why do you think that is in Nevada? Why do you think that has been the trend, and do you expect to see continue going forward?
I do expect to see that trend continue, and the reason is there's a lot more people registering as nonpartisans right now in order to attract those people. And if you call them the soft Ds or the soft Rs, the ones that are a little more towards the center, in order to attract those folks that are concerned about what everyday Nevadans are concerned are, they look at somebody that's more moderate. The difficult thing in a primary, you're dealing exclusively with Democratic voters. So it does tend to swing a little bit further left than some people would like, but that's just the way it is.
So these days, you're still working on the commission, and I know you're pretty busy these days, but what is it like still working alongside Chris G and trying to get stuff done on the commission while you're also adversaries in the governor race?
I think it puts my staff and my colleagues in a tougher position than it puts me in. I just continue doing what I'm doing. I mean, we don't see each other but for the commission meetings, when we have commission meetings. I'm still in every day, but I've always been every day in my office, and so I don't see her. She's not in the office, but I deal with her for the 2 days that we're there in the commission. We've only got one more meeting between now and the election, so we're fine.
It's kind of like Wile E. Coyote, and they punch out every night. Okay, years ago, big face-off with Clark County firefighters, acrimonious headlines, day in, day out. How is that? What's that relationship like these days?
Well, I have communication, obviously, with the firefighters, because it's one of the departments that we have as part of the county. I stood for what I thought was transparency and openness, and called out when I saw that I thought there was a problem, and while some people in the department were not happy about it, 99% of our firefighters do an exemplary job. They're terrific assets to the county, and I'm proud that they're part of the county team. There were few that abused the system, and I called them out on it. If I saw it again, I'd do the same exact thing. So it might be a little strained from some people that thought it was an attack on the firefighters in general, and it was never that. It was just trying to fix what I saw as an inequity and a problem in the system.
I guess the big thing is what you don't see. And you don't see firefighters on every corner campaigning for Chris G. Are they in the race at all in any way, or have you managed to neutralize them?
Well, I haven't seen them get in a race yet. She interviewed with them. I know I interviewed with them and explained how I felt. They explained how they felt. And I said, look, it's something that I feel strongly about. I did. I'm not ashamed. I'm proud of the fact I did it. I think it needed to be done. It had been going on for a long period of time. And had I not broached these subjects, it would probably still be going on. So time will tell what they decide to end up doing.
One of the perennial issues in the state that comes up year after year, campaign season after campaign season, is the move toward diversification of the economy, because I think so many people are concerned about that. How important do you think that is, and what steps would you like to see the state take in that direction?
Well, diversifying the economy is extremely important. Last time, we cannot continue to rely on the economy in every other city to see how well we're going to do here in Las Vegas, which is basically what happens when it's strictly a tourist economy. I think we've expanded a little bit more on the convention and visitor side to get more conventions in here, so it's not just recreational tourism. We've expanded to get more foreign visitors in who stay longer and spend more, so that's a good thing. But when you get to other industries, the state has gone out in terms of attracting Tesla and Amazon and some of those big companies. I think we need to do more statewide to attract more of that type of an industry that is not as affected by a recession, upturn, or downturn in the economy. Now, we've made a lot more progress in northern Nevada than they've made in southern Nevada, but I think there's a lot we can do. I mean, there's light manufacturing that can be done here. There's a lot of distribution along the I-15 South corridor going towards Southern California, where we've got rail spurs there where you can bring in box cars and break them down and get that product shipped to both San Diego and Los Angeles, those type areas. So there's opportunities. We just need to capitalize on them.
So do you think it is good policy to offer the kinds of tax incentives that were offered to draw companies like Tesla here?
Well, some of those incentives, you need to have a return on investment analysis of that. What are the incentives offering being? What are you giving up? I can tell you that they gave up a lot in terms of abatements and a giveaway, if that's what you want to call it. And what that does is that on the back end, it affects the funding of not just the local government, but a lot of that funding goes towards education, goes towards public safety. And you bring a big company in that's going to create a lot of jobs. And this is what happened with Tesla up north. You brought a big company in that creates jobs. They're in Story County, where there's no housing. So a lot of abatements were given. So the people live in Washoe County, where there's only one road getting there, I-80. So it's caused for a huge increase in home prices up there. Right now, the average home is over $400,000. And you've got to fix that road, get that road done, and you've got to have more schools built. Well, Washoe's not getting that tax revenue. The tax revenue is all going to Story County. So I don't think that was adequately addressed. So I think we need to do a better analysis of what you're going to get out of this, what the relationship is on these abatement situations.
Well, with going into the diversifying of the economy, and you mentioned Amazon, you've mentioned the schools a bit. I know one of the major concerns that Amazon addressed was the low grade of the school system in Nevada. What are your thoughts when you become governor as far as increasing and raising our stature as an education system for the state?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because education is one of my top two priorities that I'm dealing with. Education and jobs are my two priorities, and they kind of go together. And you're right. For a long time, we've been on the bottom of every good list and top of every bad list when it comes to education.
Yeah, and I think diversifying the economy really comes down to expanding the educational system so that you can start educating more people so they get into more jobs and everything. So,
well, you've got that's one of the assets, one of the factors. You're right. And the other factor is a lot of companies don't want to come here if we don't have quality education where they can send their kids. The people that own and run the companies and work at those companies. We need to do more on the education front. We haven't adequately funded education, especially as compared to other jurisdictions, other cities. We're basically half, when we're just $5,700, in terms of funding. If we expect to recruit and retain good teachers, the best teachers, we've got to pay them more money. You can't start people at $40,000 and expect to get the best people you possibly can. Their take-home wage, there's no way they can ever buy a house. They're lucky if they can qualify to buy a car. That's unfortunate. If we want to invest in our kids, we have to do something. We have to find the funding. the money to put into education, so we're sure that teachers have the resources and they know that they're supported. You can't have, I was in a class week before last where it was a Spanish class, 42 kids in the class. And the teacher said, I got to buy 2 more desks because I got 2 more students. It's going to 44. It's crazy. I mean, that's not
And the
teaching.
teachers are buying their own supplies too.
Absolutely. Average teacher spends $2,000 a year to buy their own supplies. And oftentimes they're buying at Costco or Sam's Club, those big boxes of cookies and crackers and granola bars. Because a lot of these kids they don't eat breakfast. They're coming to school with nothing to eat or nothing for lunch. Most of them are on subsidized lunches, but they're giving them granola bars for breakfast because these kids they come to school hungry.
It took a long time to pull Nevada across the line when it came to marijuana, for retail marijuana. And the whole idea, the thing that got us across the line, it sounded as if at the state legislature, the thing that finally did it was that the money was going to go to education. But that's only nominal, isn't it? It ends up in the general. Is there something, you have a plan for that money to where it can actually go to education?
Yeah, that was a real, to me, it was a bait and switch because I had a lot of people, particularly I spoke in Sun City Anthem and Sun City Summerlin, where it's senior type communities, and they weren't in favor of marijuana, but they were in favor of the sales pitch that this is going to create more money for education, and that's why they voted for it. That's why they supported it, and it didn't go there. It went to the general fund and the rainy day fund. The problem I've got with that going to the way it's structured now, going to just the DSA account, the distributed school account, is the vast majority of that money is generated in Clark County. This is where the majority, Clark and Washoe is where the marijuana is being sold. Some of the counties don't allow the sale of marijuana, yet they're still going to get the benefit from some of those marijuana taxes. And I just think that's unfair. I think the money should go to where it was generated, in those counties, in those jurisdictions, because they're the ones that collect it. They're the ones that are dealing with any problem that might be associated with marijuana sales, and I think that's the fairest way to go.
You bring up a point, and that is the north-south issue that's always been there, and that's fair share. It goes back for as long as anybody can remember. Is there something, do you have a plan? If you talk about it now, do you lose the north? Do you have a plan to straighten out where Southern Nevada money tends to stay more in the south and the cow counties, which I understand,
Yeah.
some has to go to, but Washoe's doing quite well, thank you very much.
Washoe does well. Washoe pretty well stands on its own 2 feet, and they do a good job equating revenue and expenses in Washoe. Las Vegas, Clark County does subsidize every other county, especially the rural counties. And that can only go so far because the needs in Clark County are immense. I mean, whether it's healthcare, whether it's schools, whether it's roads. And there's just a sense that we're always on the short end of that distribution when it comes to that money.
Always.
And that was the way folks felt when I was on the Board of Regents, and they still feel that way. So I think what we need to do is just have a better come to the table, and I'd rather address the direction of new money that's generated to where it should rightfully go and to where it's needed the most, as opposed to so we could hold people harmless and not inadvertently negatively impact counties that aren't expecting it.
That interplay that we talked about with recreational marijuana, it looks like it's going to hit exactly what the state forecasts were, $60 million over the year. Grade Clark County's response on implementation of retail marijuana sales.
I'd say we're an A. We've got some problems. I don't know if they're necessarily problems. We've got some issues we haven't addressed, and I'll get into a few of those. When we passed or implemented recreational marijuana, we had very tight control, that we wanted local control, we wanted local ownership. Well, that's all changed because we couldn't control who sold to whom. We've got a lot of outside companies, outside agencies, other states, they've come and bought numerous dispensaries, are now controlling that. So that's a little bit of a disappointment. I'm really concerned about the consumption lounge part of the marijuana industry. I mean, we've got folks coming in from out of town. We're telling them, sure, it's legal to buy this, be it medical or recreational. You can come here and buy it, but you can't smoke it in your hotel room. You can't smoke it in your car. You can't smoke it outside, but here it is. Pay for it. And I think that's a little disingenuous on our part to not have a plan in terms of, okay, where can we tell an out-of-town tourist so you can go safely consume the product that you just purchased. Now, if you buy a gummy bear, a chocolate bar, a vape pen, it's easy. You can do that in your room. Nobody knows if it's a Hershey bar or it's an infused chocolate bar. But when a lot of people like to smoke the flower, and that puts them in a tough spot where we're basically saying you're buying it legally, but you can't consume it legally. So how we deal with that question, I don't know. I've met with the Gaming Commission, the Control Board. They are vehement about not wanting it in the properties. They feel that it's against federal law and they're going to keep it out of there, so they don't want any part of it. If you come up with a retail place to put it, nobody's figured out how you monetize it. If it's a storefront, if you charge to come in, if there's a cover charge and you bring your own marijuana, you can't sell it there because they don't have a license to sell it. If that's the case, somebody's going to go in and take one pre-rolled cigarette and spend 8 hours using the free Wi-Fi and sitting on the couch watching TV with one product. How do they make any money? So no one has figured that out. So that's one of the big problems we're facing. The other one, the biggest problem, even bigger I think than consuming it, is the cash economy that we're dealing with here. It's caused significant amount of hardship and problem. I mean, I've sit on fiscal affairs and worked with the sheriff on this issue. You may as well just put sign come rob me. You've got drugs and you've got cash in the same place. So what are we doing? That's tough. I mean, they're paying their employees in cash. They're paying their rent in cash. They come down to the county and pay their taxes and their property taxes in cash with duffel bags. I know NV Energy or the Water District, they come over with a backpack full of cash, $20 bills. So that's not the right way. Now, it makes no sense where the dispensary can't take the money to the bank, but they can give it to the county and we can take it to the bank. And then it's not questioned. And that's got to be addressed because it's just setting ourselves up for a problem. And in my opinion, it's inevitable. Now, when that'll happen, I hope it's never, but at some point, a bad guy is going to push a car off the road that they know that courier is carrying cash, and we're going to have a problem.
To put this in perspective, our bank robbers know they're facing 15, 20 years. When they go to rob a bank, they know they're going to walk out with about $1,500 compared to what happens in a dispensary, which is through the roof. While we're in the business of grading, grade Metro's response to the October 1 shootings.
A+. I was intimately involved with 1 October with the sheriff. On the night of 1 October, he called me at maybe 10:30 at night and woke me up and told me, he goes, Steve, we have a live shooter on the strip and we got 1 or 2 down and a dozen wounded. And I said, okay, I'll meet you at headquarters, and drove down there. We all know what happened. I worked closely with Sheriff Lombardo and Special Agent, FBI Agent Rausch that dealt from the FBI side, and they were on it immediately. They did everything that's humanly possible. I can't thank more the SWAT team that broke into that room, that went in that room. I mean, what he had in place, I mean, with the cameras, I mean, he protected himself. They know that people were coming. They had shivs under the door, so you couldn't open the door. And let's be candid, even though the shooting had stopped, when they broke that door down, they had no idea what was going to be on the other side. That room could have been booby-trapped. Anything could have happened. And they still did it. But for the quick actions of the men and women of Metro and the MGM security force, for that matter, the death toll would have been a lot higher and injuries would have been a lot higher as well.
That night, how much closer did that night and that event bring you to the people of Las Vegas? And did that event and the handling of that whole situation, did that give you some kind of motivation or drive to now run for governor?
It impacted me a lot, and I guess it did give me some drive. I mean, I saw some things that, candidly, I never wanted to see. I've never been in the military. I've never been to a war zone, but I was in one on Tuesday morning. I saw the bodies on the Harvest Festival site. I saw the blood. I saw a whole barbecue full of chicken or turkey legs that were still smoking, that it had been so long that this had been there. And the eeriness of the whole thing when you would walk through the site and it was strewn with, not the folks that were working there, because we had Metro, we had coroners, we had everybody there working, but you'd see backpacks and satchels and purses and shoes and hats and shirts and keys and cell phones and anything you can imagine strewn all over the ground. Over 10, 11 acres of property there was just strewn everywhere. And you had to be careful where you're walking so you didn't step on anything. And then you would see a cell phone or hear it and it would start ringing. And you'd see the phone light up, you know how it lights up when it rings. And you just say to yourself, that's somebody that's looking for their loved one. Now, I don't know at the time if that loved one lived, if they died, if they were in surgery, if they were okay. That was scary, but I got really involved with a lot of the families. I'm still involved with quite a few of the families. Gave a eulogy for a gentleman that I never knew. I helped on the last flight home for a Navy Sergeant at Arms that got killed on the site. He was there with his mother, and you know, the casket, it's a flag draped casket, goes up the conveyor into the belly of the plane, and the mom said to me, she says, Steve, my son served, he was just signed up for his 3rd tour of duty in Afghanistan, and she said he came home and got killed at a concert. Who
That's
could
incredible.
imagine that? And it's just, and the dad said to me, he goes, we're not supposed to bury our kids. I said, I know we're not, but your son was a hero. He saved other people from dying as a result of his actions and his military training. So it opened my eyes to be a little bit more thankful for what we have and to recognize the situation that we're in. If one thing good could come from it, if you call it a good thing, I got to interview with TV and radio stations and print media from all over the world, not just all over the country, and they saw Las Vegas that they'd never seen before. The real Las Vegas, the families, the churches, synagogues, schools, parks, neighborhoods, that type thing, restaurants that were just so incredible. The sheriff and I had put out a call for early in the morning of the second, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning before we went and saw the Sir Hartfield's widow at UMC and did our best to try to console her. We put out a call for blood donations because we knew we were going to have hundreds of surgeries and we did not have the blood capacity to do all those surgeries. And there were lines around the blood bank by 6 o'clock in the morning that could not be serviced. And I can tell you there were people that were 2 blocks back in the line and they said, look, it's going to be an 8 or 10 hour wait. And people said, fine, I'll wait. They sat down and they waited. They gave a bottle of water, and schools gave the seniors that were 18 years old the day off to go donate blood. Companies gave employees off to go donate blood. Then we started to try to collect some money, and from the initial contribution that I put in, we, as of yesterday, when we recognized the members of the Victims Distribution Committee, we raised $31.7 million, which doesn't bring anybody's loved one back, but it gave them some money to pay their rent or their, a lot of these people haven't been able to go back to work even since then. And it let them pay their rent or their car payment or something and buy groceries. So some good came from that extent, but there's people who are going to be impacted for a lifetime, and it was just unfortunate that one man could rain so much hate down on the Las Vegas Valley.
Has anything changed that allowed that to happen in the first place? Availability of weapons, availability of the room, has anything changed in Las Vegas? I know that it's difficult to stop a madman because there are only so many plans you can make.
People talk about, the changes that the hotel should have made and, where they thought that they were short, but I don't believe that with the MGM. I really don't. I mean, I saw everything that was there, and we all know that if a guest puts a do not disturb sign on the room, then maid's happy because that's a room that she doesn't have to make up that day. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people sleep late in the morning. They don't want to be disturbed. They don't want to get up to answer the door. So I don't see any problem with that. I mean, they delivered room service there. He just used the cart for a nefarious purpose to attach cameras to, so he could see who was coming down the hall. We can make these properties fortresses where you can't get anything up. Every bag's got to get screened. But what are you going to do the entire Las Vegas experience? I mean, if you make it too difficult, people aren't going to come here. They're going to go somewhere else. No one would have anticipated someone using a hammer to break out a window and put that many weapons out there. And the unfortunate thing is there's no reason. I don't think we're ever going to find a motive. I can tell you that in dealing with the FBI, they're frustrated that usually they can get to something. And I mean, they looked at everything. If it was a gambling history, if it was a business history, finances, health, I mean, everything. There's found nothing.
I think the consensus is the people that have looked the closest is this was a bastard. This is just a really crappy person.
Yeah, but I mean, what made him pick that day and that room and that venue? I mean, he'd been down at Life is Beautiful a couple weeks before and didn't go. Now, maybe he couldn't get the right room that he wanted that night, or it's a specific room, or maybe he just wasn't feeling up to it. But if you think of it, you know all the details that relates to that. You're looking at a guy that they have on video, and I don't know how much of the videos you've seen, that was playing the slot machine that afternoon, 3, 4, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He's playing video poker, and 5 hours later, he's going to go up and this heinous act. I mean, how does somebody do this? It's just
Cold-blooded.
crazy. Cold-blooded, yeah.
We get to sit back and second guess. I'm a lifelong gun owner, but I'm not running for governor. You are. Did this change any positions that you have on gun control?
I think it's fortified my position. The real one that changed my position was Sandy Hook, when we had the problem at Sandy Hook at school. And I'm a big believer in the Second Amendment. I believe you should be able to own a gun to go hunting, to protect yourself, for target practice, for whatever it might be, recreation. But there is no reason that the everyday citizen needs to have assault rifles, and I qualify assault rifles as military tactical type weapons, however that's defined. Those are meant as weapons of war and weapons for SWAT teams and that sort of thing. So I'm 100% opposed to assault military type weapons. There is no reason you need expanded cartridges that shoot 50 and 100 rounds. There's just no, you can't use it to go deer hunting or duck hunting. There's going to be nothing left. And you don't need a bump stock. A bump stock is something that was invented to help a disabled person use a rifle, and it was misused. So those sort of things, I think, need to be eliminated, and I think we need to institute background checks. Now, the background check in this matter would not, in this instance, would not have mattered. I mean, he'd have passed the background check because there was no flags. But there are other ones that we deal with on a daily basis where it's oftentimes a domestic dispute, where the girlfriend and the boyfriend or the husband and wife get in a dispute, and he beats her up, and she gets a restraining order, and he goes buys a gun off Craigslist and comes back 6 hours later, 12 hours later the next day and kills somebody. If we could prevent one of those, it would go a long way towards doing that. And there needs to be some common sense. And reasonable gun owners don't disagree with anything that I think I stand for. So that's where we're planning on.
For the record, I think that might be the first time that I ever heard anybody go on the record and say they shifted their position on guns, and I applaud you for going on the record like that.
I'm just glad to give us a straight answer.
Yeah, exactly.
You're going to get that, like it or not. You're going to
circle around 100 times.
No.
On the Raiders stadium deal, were you satisfied with the ultimate outcome? And specifically, did UNLV get what the university needed out of the deal?
I'm very satisfied with the outcome. I was a big proponent of the Raiders UNLV/UNLV stadium. There's a lot of misinformation out there about the stadium. We can clear up some of it right now. First off, the Raiders don't own the stadium. Clark County owns the stadium. It's the county stadium, and they have a 30-year lease on the stadium. UNLV got a lot. I mean, the Raiders went out of their way to accommodate UNLV. They went so much as to, it's a dome stadium, which you're very familiar with, I'm sure, but UNLV wanted AstroTurf. They didn't want they wanted artificial. They didn't want grass. So the Raiders installed a tray system, similar to what they have in Phoenix, where the grass is going to come out on a tray, and it's going to be in the parking lot all week where they'll water it, cut it, feed it. It'll get sunshine, and if it's Saturday night, the Rebels are going to play on artificial turf inside that's underneath, that's on the floor, and then they're going to bring the tray in Sunday morning to let the Raiders play on that afternoon. So UNLV got a lot. I mean, they really did. I sat with, when it came down to the end, and Mark Bedane was he one of the stadium authority meetings, because they'd reached an impasse on the stadium. They couldn't agree on certain things, and I finally got the Raiders to acquiesce in the first game that's going to be played, and there's a UNLV game, which the Raiders really wanted that first game, but this first one's going to be a UNLV game, and Mark basically said that Steve gave us a good swift kick in the ass and got us moving, which is what we did. I mean, UNLV is going to do well. I wish they'd have changed some things, but that was UNLV's decision not to. For example, the suite sales, I was hoping that the Raiders sold out all the suites in the stadium already. They've sold out the suites, and even at high prices, you need 10 and 15-year commitments, and I guess the prices weren't high because they sold them quickly. I wanted to add UNLV onto that. Just say, look, you're paying $750,000 a year for the suite. How about we just charge you another $30,000, and we'll make it you get the UNLV package as well. And the Raiders were willing to do that, but UNLV wanted to go their own way and sell them on their own. Now, how they're going to do, I don't know. That remains to be seen, but
A lot of suites to sell.
it would have been a big impact, I think, on the program, and I wish they'd have thought differently about it. But UNLV got a lot. I mean, they got their own branding. They got their own locker room that's going to be exclusively for them. So I'm comfortable with that. I think they did very, very well.
The one guy that got cut out of this deal, Sheldon Adelson, what's the lasting fallout from that when you get a guy with that size checkbook
Yeah.
floating around in the background?
I met with Sheldon and his son-in-law and Rob Goldstein and Andy Boot on dozens of occasions dealing with the stadium and the meetings we had. And Sheldon is obviously a sharp businessman and would go so far and wanted a certain return and couldn't quite get to where he wanted to get to, and thought that, I think, frankly, he didn't think the Raiders could find somebody to fill his shoes, and they found Bank of America and the NFL to fill his shoes, so they went it alone. And I think they would have rather had him involved because he had a lot of still influence in the town, and he has deep pockets in order to provide financing that might be available, might be necessary. But ultimately, that didn't happen, and he's going to watch this one.
From an outsider's perspective, it seemed that it was at the 11th hour that he made a demand for an equity position in the team. Did that actually play out that way? What
Well,
was that?
it was close to the, I don't know if it was the 11th hour, but I think Sheldon wanted a part of the team, and that was just non-negotiable. I mean, it wasn't the Raiders that it was non-negotiable. It was the NFL that it was non-negotiable. But they will not allow a casino owner to own part of a team. Now, could that change in 5, 10, 20, 50 years? Maybe. I don't know. But that wasn't. And the Raiders are, they get the bad rap for a lot of things, but a lot of their positions their hands were tied by the NFL. They've got a lot of the revenues are shared. They're pooled and shared by all the teams. And they had rules that they had to follow. They came down from the NFL, and they couldn't do certain things. And selling an equity share to a casino owner was one of the things that were not
Yeah,
allowed.
you got to think that will change in the coming years.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah,
I think.
but as of now, yeah, that is still the rule, and it's hard and fast.
Was
yeah.
that what killed his participation? Was that the
Well, that was part
was
of
the
it.
exit?
That was part of it. It was also that he had a problem with some of the. Sheldon is obviously great at working a deal because he's got casinos all over the world, but so is the NFL. And it's tough when you've got Sheldon's a billionaire, and many times over, but I met a lot of those owners, Mr. Kroenke and Mr. Kraft and Mr. Spanos and those guys, but they're all billionaires too. So you get a bunch of people with big bank accounts and pretty big egos, and getting anyone to back down was a difficult thing to do, and I think it just got pushed so far, and Sheldon could not see where there was a return on the money that he was going to have to put in. But I commend him, because had he not been involved at the beginning, we probably wouldn't be here.
You had a lot of involvement in the Raiders Stadium and some success with that, but more clearly, you had tremendous success with the Golden Knights, and you had a lot of involvement with bringing them here. And how proud are you and excited about that whole outcome?
Well, I'll be there later tonight. I'm really thrilled.
But you were really involved in the season ticket sales
I did,
and getting all
yeah. I
the
bought
initial deposits and
I
everything.
bought the first 2 tickets for the Golden Knights. I gave Bill Foley a check at one of the press conferences, and I remember when Bill wasn't at the first meeting, the Maloofs were at the first meeting, and a representative of Bill, and they came to me. As a county commissioner, we hear a lot of ideas. I mean, alligator wrestling and indoor ski jumping, and I can't even begin to tell you the things that have
Indoor
been
ski
brought
jumping
before.
sounds
yeah,
fun.
Yeah.
Let's revisit them.
Yeah, I hear a lot of things, and I remember when they came into the office and said, "Look, we want to bring an NHL hockey team here. What do you think?" And I was like, "Seriously?" We didn't have an arena at the time. They were just working on the T-Mobile, and they never backed down. I mean, they kept moving forward, and got to meet Gary Bettman. They brought the commissioner out for some of the meetings, and I remember saying to him, I go, "What do you think?" He goes, "They'll never sell the tickets," because Bill had committed to selling all these tickets. I go, "I think we could sell the tickets." He goes, "You're never going to sell that many season tickets." And Bill never backed down, and the Maloofs never backed down, and they went to any bar, restaurant, street corner where there was 3 people gathered to try to sell those season tickets. So I remember giving him the check for the first ones, and Bill smiling, and in fact, I tweeted that out a couple weeks ago, because it's still been less than a year since we got a team. If you think about it, it hasn't been very long.
Huh.
And then Bill came the commissioner came when they announced that the franchise was going to be awarded here. And he remembered, and he said, "You were right. You sold the tickets, and right now it's the hottest ticket that there is, or the hottest franchise in the NHL. Their memorabilia is selling better than anybody's, and they are incredible in this community. I cannot begin to tell you how incredible the Knights have been in this community. I got work with them during 1 October we talked about. I asked them for some help. They spent hours at the Metro Command Station signing autographs, taking selfies, the players did, visiting. I mean, I had my daughter works for the team, in fact, and we did a trunk or treat out at the Enterprise Command Station, and I give out, those little fun-sized candy bars. And she goes, "Dad, that was a good event for you. I think the Knights are going to come." So they pull up with a truck with 5 players and hockey pucks. They hand out, like, anybody wants my candy bar when I'm next to the Knights. But they were there. They've done, I believe, 2 Make-A-Wish gifts already. They send their mascot Chance I've had him go to half a dozen different schools for reading weeks and, awards for the kids. And they have just ingratiated themselves with this community in a way that no one would have ever thought possible. I mean, the ceremony that they did for that first game, when they had the names on the ice and the first responders were there and the survivors were there, was beautiful. I mean, there was not a dry eye in the house. And on the last game of the year, when they retired the number 58, that no one will ever wear, the number 58 on the Knights team, it just says a lot about who they were and, how much they mean to this community. So they've been great. I mean, you couldn't ask for it's a fairy tale, frankly, and I know Bill Foley well. Got to know him real well. When I happened to be in Sonoma with my girlfriend, we visited his vineyard, and he's got a nice vineyard down there, but his love is hockey, and I said, Bill, you told me that you were looking at, 2-3 years of getting the playoffs, and you maybe could win in 5 or 7 years, because his theory was, you see, at my age, I don't have a 20-year plan, because I've got a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, and he's just, he couldn't be more thrilled right now, and they are responding, and I've gotten to know some of the players, and they're taking it personal that, maybe they were viewed by their team as misfits or disposable, and they disposed of them, and now they're in a great position, one of 4 teams that are left.
The pressure's really going to be on the Raiders to
Yeah.
step
Yeah,
it
it is.
up, because the sense of community around the
Yeah.
hockey team is
If
just
they,
absolutely right.
if they had not pulled it together this first season, their boat would have been swamped by the Raiders.
Yeah.
Instead, they end up they may be the heroes forever. This community needed something after October 1, and the fit was perfect, was
You're
absolutely
right, and for
perfect.
those of your viewers and listeners that are going to hear this, you go to those games, the enthusiasm is just, it's
Gives
beyond
you
belief.
goosebumps.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they do such a great job marketing with the music and with the pictures, and the fans are just in love with them. I mean, they're just, I just hope they keep playing well.
So if you could wave a magic wand, all these years that you've been in the county commission, you could wave a magic wand, what would you have taken back? What would you have changed in your tenure when you look back at that time? What are the areas that you would change?
I don't know if I'd have changed anything, frankly, Mark. I mean, everything they did, right or wrong, was a learning experience. The bad moves or mistakes kind of might have made me learn for the next time that I face a situation. I think I've taken all of it as feedback and growth and tried to make a positive out of it as I move forward. So I'm thrilled with some of the things that we've done. I mean, you talked about the big ones with 1 October and the Raiders and the Knights and that stuff, but I'm proud of other things we did too. We built Sean's Park at Opportunity Village, which is the first all-access park for disabled kids and adults, for that matter, where they can actually hook a wheelchair up to a swing so a kid can feel the experience of being on a swing, and put a miniature golf course that's accessible by wheelchairs. That was a big thing for me. I mean, when we opened up when I was on the commission, I was walking through the airport and saw some of our service folks sleeping on the floor on their knapsacks, and didn't realize that we were one of the few airports that did not have a USO lounge in the airport. So got with Director Vasiliadis at the airport, and we opened up one. Now we have 2 USO lounges in the airport, which is ranked the best in the country for the troops that are coming through there, where they can have a place they can sleep and watch video games, play video games, watch TV, and get a snack to eat or something, because they don't have a lot of money when they're coming through, and we provide that for them. So those are other things that we did too. I mean, we turned UMC around. It was losing $70 million a year, and last year UMC made $20 million, and we invested every dime of that back into the hospital with robot surgeons type thing, a surgical robot that does surgeries, and building a new wing, hopefully, for a tower for children's pediatric care. So we're doing some good stuff. There's some good stuff happening.
One of the first things that the next governor of Nevada is going to face is the opioid crisis. Nevada was one of the first states to suffer, to be hit hard by importers from Mexico that brought in very, very inexpensive heroin. The county just joined suit. I saw now Laxalt is, I don't know, the timing, I guess, is suspicious. Now that he's in the middle of a race, decided that he's going to bring suit. What can the governor do? What is it that you can do from that perspective to do anything to help solve the problem?
Well, the governor can certainly help continue driving the ship forward, because the state's suffered as well, and that's why I think the Attorney General finally decided to get on board. In my opinion, should have been done long ago, should have gotten on board. And when you see I'm not just talking about the financial costs that's spent to the county in terms of care at UMC and some of our hospitals and social services and our first responders and whatnot, but the lives that were lost as a result of opioid addictions, and the statistics that I got numerous briefings before we decided to sign on to the suit and be part of that the way some of that stuff was prescribed in such massive dosages and availabilities, and it's a problem. It's a problem, and it's affected every generation, every culture, every age group. It affects everybody, and it affects families related to those folks, and it's unfortunate, but I think that they knew for a long time the impact of it, and just we're making so much money, they just went ahead with it.
Now, they tried to get Laxalt involved more than a year ago, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
nothing.
And he chose not to, and I don't know what his mindset, his thought was at the time, why he chose not to get involved, but, jumped at the first chance we had to be part of it, because there will definitely be a settlement, there's no doubt in my mind, and we can return some of that money to the people that had to pay the money out of pocket, and I don't know what his reasoning could have been to sit on the sidelines, but I think it was long overdue, and I'm glad we did join in that suit.
First job, walk in the door, you win. Hooray, you won, you won, you won. What do you do walking in the doors, Governor?
Well, the first thing I want to do is work on the education system, because it desperately needs to be fixed. I mean, I'm a believer that the quality of the education should not depend on your zip code. I mean, and I speak, like I said, a lot of schools, and if I'm in Summerlin or Green Valley, a lot of the kids, they have iPads, and, they're brand new, spanking new, and you get into the urban core schools, you're lucky if they got books and pencils in there, and they're old. And I don't think we have done, I know we have not done enough in terms of remodeling of schools. It's one thing when you got a school that's a year, 3 years, or 10 years old for that matter. It's another thing when you get into the inner core where these schools are 30 and 50 years old that have not had adequate maintenance in 50 years. And we need to fix that. Those kids deserve an education the same as everybody else does, so that'll be my number one priority day one.
And with that, we call it a day. The Vegas Legal Podcast, I want to thank you sincerely, Commissioner Steve
Pleasure,
Sisolak.
thank you, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Tyler Morgan, publisher of Vegas Legal Magazine, thanks for doing the good work, bringing some new life to the legal community in Southern Nevada. Jeff Haney, Vice President of Fierro Communications, and for all of you out there with a story idea, an axe to grind, get a hold of Vegas Legal, the leading magazine in Southern Nevada legal market. You can call Tyler at
702-222-3476.
reach out, tell us, tell your friends. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thanks.